Okay, is he gone? Okay, good. The coast is clear. Now I can get back to what I was doing before. Anyway, after looking over the original Sonic the Hedgehog movie, it's time to discuss the other and more popular film to feature the character. Or should I say films? As now, Sonic the Hedgehog is part of a movie trilogy, and one that's incredibly popular. It was successful at the box office, moderate ratings from critics, and fan reception was perceived pretty well, to the point where I think there's a good argument to be made about the Sonic movies being some of the best video game movies in not just recent memory, but also of all time. Obviously, being a fan of the series, I have talked about some of these movies in the past, but I felt I wanted to give my favorite video game series of all time a little more credit than just quick thoughts on the movie. Now, for a Sonic fan like myself, I simply had to wait till this trilogy was completed so I can discuss in full detail what makes these movies so memorable in modern day cinema. This is a strange time for movies, with many industry issues, but artists are still creating some of the best movies out there in combat against the ever-looming threats that are around. There might be some movies that feel like a dystopian nightmare once in a while, but there's also a ton of films that I couldn't even begin to imagine being that good ever. The Sonic movies go in a stranger direction, as they're not by any means cinematic masterpieces, but many would still state an unironic fondness for them. So for today's follow-up video, I'm going to deliver on that initial promise and talk about what makes this Sonic movie trilogy worth watching, covering it all from the 3 movies and Knuckles. Here's what makes the Sonic movie series the potential best video game movies of all time. Now, you think with the initial knowledge that this is my favorite video game series, I would have been extremely excited for the prospect of a Sonic the Hedgehog movie coming into existence. So, well, how did I feel when the announcement of Sonic finally getting a movie was actually revealed? Utterly horrified. Now, talks of a Sonic movie have occurred since the series first started. With it being such a big hit to rival the biggest video game character of all time with Mario, it was clear people wanted to capitalize on this success. Though, here's the thing. Video game movies didn't have a good time getting off the ground. If there was any kind of adaptation that would have the worst of luck, it would be turning a very successful video game into a movie. It wouldn't be so bad. In fact, I wouldn't mind seeing awesome movies based on games I like, featuring some of the favorite characters in a story big enough for a movie. Yet, that never seems to happen. Video game movies always turn out poor in a way, whether it be due to how poorly made the film was, or how it doesn't faithfully adapt its source material. Or, more often than not, both if I'm being honest. Video game movies would usually turn out bad. Even today, we still get a lot of bad video game movies. But for the longest time, it seemed like we never got a proper translation to the silver screen for any of them. So, that leads us back to Sonic. This is a series that certainly has popularity. But, take it from me. Take it from someone who has seen the highs and lows of this series. Sonic is easily mocked.
I don't know. New Sonic just doesn't seem as fast. I guess they're just missing a little blast processing.
Despite how dedicated the fan base is and how many people love the games, for a while, Sonic was considered the laughingstock of the video game industry.
Yes, we're of course talking about Sonic, and while Sega's console line tanked back in '01, it's still sad to have to watch, our dear beloved Sonic in crappy games.
It seemed to have occurred once Sega started developing games for other consoles, which did lead to a shift in quality to Sonic, which is something that did contribute to Sonic getting overtly made fun of. Later Sonic games became rather infamous in quality, which led to even longtime fans having doubts of Sonic's future as a video game character. People were seeing him as this failure of a mascot that tried to take down Mario and is just seen as this cringy franchise with cringy characters and cringy fans.
When will you learn?
Sometimes you didn't hear the end of people shitting on Sonic. Some say the games were never good to begin with.
Okay. I think we're at the
Real
point
talk.
where we need to admit that this was never really a great franchise.
Nope.
And
Those people are wrong. But with all of the stuff regarding Sonic's reputation, what makes you think a movie would make it better? If Mario couldn't even get that good of a movie that's faithful to its source material, then it seemed like there would be no way in hell that the most ridiculed video game franchise would somehow get out of that easily. It's not that I don't want a good Sonic movie. It's just knowing the trend that there was going to be some studio exec that would fuck it up somehow. The talks of a Sonic movie accelerated further in the mid-2000s when the Sonic movie actually had a team behind it, bringing in Deadpool director Tim Miller as executive producer and an animator named Jeff Fowler to direct the film. Paramount was set to release the first ever feature-length live-action Sonic film in November of 2019. Now the first major announcement that got my attention was this. I'm sorry, but...
What? 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 What?
What? What?
What? What? What?
Yeah, there's not enough ways to say the word what to emphasize my feelings towards this casting. Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik. Yeah, I was one of those kids who was obsessed with Jim Carrey, so that aspect was surreal. But just the notion of wacky comedic actor Jim Carrey playing Robotnik, I don't know how that would be. It sounds like it could be amazing since Robotnik does work as a more comedic villain in my eyes. But even then, how well will that look? Like, I just need to see it. I need to know what the hell Jim Carrey as Robotnik would look like. Will they make him fat? Like he did when he almost played Curly from the Three Stooges? I need to know! In fact, the only what the fuck casting that actually topped this was honestly probably...
Donkey Kong will also be making an appearance. He will be played by Seth Rogen.
Though at least that casting wasn't something I necessarily hated, and it was shortly announced that Sonic would be voiced by Ben Schwartz, since Larry King wasn't good enough apparently.
This is your
Hello there.
150th episode.
Hello.
That's great.
Hello, I'm just a hedgehog.
That's-
No one cares about me.
Schwartz wasn't an issue, because from what I had seen at the time, he could work for the character. The bigger concern came after I saw this image. This was a warning sign of horrors to come, as well. Just look at this. Sure, it's just a silhouette of Sonic, but look how weird his body is structured. Why is it super muscular? It's kind of giving off the vibe that Sonic is going for a more realistic look, which that never works. It's creepy. It's the core reason why the genre of live action remakes fail. Sonic is worthy of being an animated film, and it's not like we haven't seen proof of it within the series over the years. But no, you gotta make it a live action one. And it seemed like it was aiming to be one of those kids movies where cartoon character goes to the real world and it's a fish out of water story in the worst of ways, just from those vibes alone. And don't get me started on this poster I saw on Bubbly before it was even released online at my own work. Good lord, look at his legs! Why do they look like that? Things weren't looking good, which is why I was ever so prepared for a trailer for this shit to come out. I knew it was going to look awful, and possibly one of the worst things of that year, along with the two worst movies I've seen in the past decade.
Yes.
So, I was just needing some confirmation on how bad it was going to be. So, how was that first trailer, you ask? Well, to best describe the day the trailer came out, let's talk about another day Sonic fans remember so fondly. October 10th, 2007, the day Sonic was announced for Super Smash Bros. Brawl. After so much shit this series had gotten in the past few years, Sonic's announcement in Smash was like a dream come true. Everyone was psyched for this hedgehog finally being able to fight Mario and all these other characters. It felt like a miracle happened, and it was never a better time to be a Sonic fan. April 30th, 2019 was the exact fucking opposite of that.
Meow?
This trailer was awful. It looked every bit as bad as I feared, and man, this design just doesn't work. It's one of the worst design choices for a big movie in the same year that gave us Will Smith Genie.
None of that ringing a bell.
An ugly CGI design that strives for realism that lacks what made the original character so appealing. This was awful, and some might say fans were the only ones complaining, but let's be real. Everyone thought this was a bad design.
Why does the Sonic from Wreck-It Ralph look more like Sonic than the Sonic from Sonic? Ever think about that?
It's not like Sonic the Hedgehog, where like as soon as I saw the trailer, I wanted to actually burn all of my Sonic games in retaliation for the horrific thing that I was witnessing.
Even people who weren't huge into Sonic were like, this is atrocious. It topped movies like Ghostbusters 2016 as the most disliked trailer on YouTube, and even that trailer wasn't nearly as bad as this. Naturally, this movie was shaping up to be a disaster, as there was no way the studio was aware how much this movie was a bad idea. So, what else was Paramount going to do other than delay the movie to 2020 to fix the design of the character?
Wait, what?
Yeah, in a shocking turn of events, they didn't just go with the complicit route. Someone behind the scenes realized what was going on and decided to actually push for the movie to be improved. Now, I'm not sure that would make up for everything, but there were things that did kind of have potential. It was just mixed in with more bad than good. Like, Jim Carrey seemed kind of neat as Robotnik, and hey, that end tease where he actually looks like the character was kind of sick, not gonna lie. Yet who knew if this new change in design was going to be enough to make up for the rest of the film? Well, turns out this movie actually did what the likes of the Aladdin and Lion King remakes couldn't do. Make a live action adaptation with an appealing character design.
I'm Sonic, a little ball of super energy in an extremely handsome package.
So, by November of 2019, we got a new trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie. And they fulfilled the promise of redesigning Sonic to look more like he should. And that sold me on this movie not being terrible. It already looked more appealing with just this one change alone. I actually give a ton of respect for the filmmakers for fighting for this change, and damn it, for this reason, this movie should have been nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Oscars. Especially since, come on, there were only like 6 special effects driven movies that year, so you should have had at least gave it a shout out. However, some say the movie still wasn't going to be saved by a lackluster script. And from the looks of it, it's still a movie that's meant to be an adaptation of something that, while as dedicated of a fan base it has, also is still relatively mocked. Though only time would tell if that actually was the case. So, come February of 2020, the Sonic movie was finally released. After all the hype, all the controversy, all the redesigns, and it just being Sonic, the first feature film of the iconic video game character, is good. Yeah, that's basically what I can say about this movie. It's good. Mostly just kind of average, but it does have a few things that elevate it to a very enjoyable and fun experience for Sonic fans, and maybe even people who are new to the series. You might think I'm crazy, but I've come across non-Sonic fans who actually genuinely enjoyed this, or kids liking this as their introduction to the iconic video game character. As far as video game adaptations go, and especially in comparison to what we could have gotten, this was surprisingly decent. The The movie keeps it pretty simple this time, as it's about Sonic on Earth trying to become a hero by stopping the evil Dr. Robotnik. There's no Knuckles, no Shadow, no Rouge the Bat, no Professor Pickle, no Bean the Dynamite, not even Tails or Scratch or Grounder, just Sonic and Robotnik. It keeps it simple, much like the first game, which makes sense, as a movie is kind of the main gateway nowadays for people getting into something not film related. So of course they'll mostly focus on the first game. Now granted, they do take quite a bit of liberties, as with every adaptation, no matter how faithful. The first of which being the introduction to this character.
That's Longclaw. She took care of me.
This is Longclaw, who I guess in this universe is Sonic's guardian. Now, this is one of the weirder parts of the movie, for me. Mostly because it's kind of abrupt how this character is introduced. Granted, you get a cool hint to the existence of Knuckles in this. Seriously, that was kind of hype. But this Owl character is just introduced as Sonic's mother, essentially. And we don't know anything about her or what this original world was. Though, I think the thing that gets to me more so, and what really adds to this being rushed, is this fact. As you're probably wondering, what Sonic game is this character from? Well, none. Yeah, this is another new character introduced, and of all characters to essentially be Sonic's mom? Why an owl? Like, she doesn't really look like she's in relation to any Sonic character. She looks more like she belongs in the Owls of Ga'Hoole. In fact, there's barely any owls in the Sonic games to begin with, so I have no idea why they came to this conclusion. The only owl character in Sonic I can think of was that old man owl from the Sonic OVA. And look at these characters. I don't think there's any chance this guy was the inspiration to this character over here. Plus, we never see this character again, as the rest of the movie just focuses on Sonic being on Earth as a recluse. He sees the world through watching over the mountains of Green Hill. Of course, because he's lonely, that causes the government to notice and leads them to get help from Dr. Robotnik. Meanwhile, Sonic teams up with Tom the Cop, as he's the only way Sonic is able to feel protected from the unknown force of Robotnik. Thus leads to this being basically a small road movie with Sonic and the Prince from Enchanted. It's, for a lack of a better term, a kid's movie. And I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses because this movie was made for younger audiences. However, I noticed that this will most definitely be an introduction for kids with Sonic. And admittedly, I think they could have done a lot worse with it. At worst, it feels rather typical, because it managed to have elements that we see in a lot of kids' movies that are deemed unfavorable. Everything from lowbrow jokes,
oh come on,
and just being more so played for laughs as a simple adventure, when you could have done more with Sonic than just, well, a kids movie. I get that they wanted to save things for later installments, but even then, it does feel like a standard affair with Sonic in the same vein of other road comedies, or even movies with animated animal sidekicks in the real world. It does fall into those tropes, yet it manages to succeed a little better than other movies of this genre. I think the number one thing that makes this movie significantly better than everyone thought it was going to be was the design of Sonic himself. Now, yes, you could argue that's not a reason to simply love the movie, but when seeing this script and knowing what the original design was,
basically it looks like I'm gonna have to save your planet.
Thinking of those scenes in my head just looked unappealing. Sonic is meant to be an expressive character that thrives on a more stylistic design. Making him this realistic looking creature just doesn't work. And don't tell me it wouldn't be realistic if he looked cartoony. He's already a goddamn blue hedgehog. I can suspend my disbelief with that alone. You don't need to ground it. Sonic actually looks like how he should. And even though they did still change a few things, like Sonic actually has 2 eyelids instead of just the 1 eye thing, and he has fully blue arms instead of a tan. Though those changes I can see why they were made, because it does admittedly look a bit more natural if they wanted to have it still be somewhat more realistic. Plus, he still honestly looks fine. Even despite this, this is the kind of change that is certainly not worth macing a GameStop employee over. Ugly Sonic just didn't work out. In an age of really horrific designs for live action adaptation, it's nice that they actually went with a better choice instead of this shit. I mean, Disney didn't even change their designs for their shitty remakes. So the fact this shit managed to fail with audience before release speaks volumes. Besides, it's not like Disney would end up using Ugly Sonic for a future movie.
Yeah, Dale, I'm gonna be up on that stage too, right beside you.
Oh no. Not the damn Rescue Rangers movie. Why, Disney? Why? Yeah, this would not work as a movie. Those who think they should have kept the original design, you are wrong. I'm sorry, we don't need it. Anyway, outside of his design, I think more so than that, what sells this as being a decent Sonic movie is honestly just how Sonic is personified. You can take liberties with a character as long as you still make them feel like the same character fans grew up with. The essence of what made the character is still there, regardless of how many differences there are in design, or whatever event this character goes through. Sonic is the overtly optimistic and energetic character that reigns true in this movie. He always had a fun sense of attitude, not being afraid of who he is, but also is a genuinely good-hearted character that wants to help out as much as he can. That's basically in a nutshell. And the movie, while takes a rather simplistic approach story-wise, does make Sonic very likable here. Most people I know who like this movie like it for this character, and some of them aren't even Sonic fans, which is even more interesting to see. It goes to show that Sonic had an appeal for a reason, and the film does highlight that fun energy and speed the character is known for. To really add to this was Ben Schwartz's performance as the character, and he's been starting to appear in a lot more things lately. Apparently voice work and the color blue are his matchup, but honestly, listening to him as Sonic, his voice fits really well for the character. It's the exact kind of energetic, snarky attitude we want from the character, and Schwartz pulls it off super well here. He really gets to shine voicing Sonic, and while he might be more of a big celeb than an average voice actor to a small extent, his performance fits the character to a T. Sonic truly makes this movie with a lot of great moments throughout. The highlight of the whole entire film is the bar sequence where Sonic goes really fast. It's your typical character runs around and does shit while a song plays in the background, but even then, considering Sonic's personality, it ends up being a fun and fitting scene for the character. It adds to this film being fairly fun, even if it goes more so for comedy than action. But it's a decent comedy. Not to say everything works, the human comedy tends to be more on the miss side. It's a bit generic, leans on a lot of over-the-top humor that can feel forced at times. They're just sort of your basic human casts, and the actors aren't bad here, but they don't leave too much of an impression on me. One would hope that their screen time would lessen in the sequel, and well, let's just say it's both better and worse for them in some ways. Really, the main standout of the human cast is unsurprisingly Jim Carrey as Robotnik. 10-year-old me would have been hyped for this casting, but for what it is, it's a solid interpretation. He's probably a little bit more crazier in this compared to how Eggman would usually act, but Carrey does showcase a lot of his energy we like seeing from him. My only fault is that maybe they could have made Carrey look a bit more like him throughout, rather than just at the end. But even despite that, it's a solid attempt at the character. There's not a whole lot else to discuss with this movie. It doesn't even have that much fan service, like a lot of other big property-based movies do nowadays. There's a couple here and there, the funniest being a callback to this drawing earlier on, and there's a nice piano rendition of Green Hill Zone at the end. But it's fairly typical as a live-action video game adaptation for kids go. But it's still not bad, and it's one that if I was a kid when this movie came out, I definitely would have loved it. It's a decent representation of one of gaming's most iconic characters. Yes, it does try to be a blockbuster and a kid's film, and some might shrug that off still. Some will see this as another dumb kids movie. And while I do agree, movies shouldn't always be given a pass just because they're geared towards a younger audience, The execution of this Sonic movie is the kind of movie I don't mind existing. Where some critics might shrug this off as something that isn't worthwhile because it's not as good as the really thought-provoking stuff that's out right now. But honestly, sometimes certain movies don't have to aim too high to be something to like. Take it from someone like me. I tend to love and like a lot of different movies of different genres of varying degrees of quality. I'm the kind of person who found something like Paths of Glory to be a profound masterpiece. But I'm also the kind of person who likes the first Transformers film from 2007. I think Parasite is one of the most brilliant and thoughtful films of the past decade. Yet I also genuinely enjoyed the Mario movie. Movies don't have to be the best to be likable, and in the case of Sonic the Hedgehog, that's how I view it. Not a masterpiece, but I say it's definite proof that we've come a long way from what video game movies used to be like in the 90s. Though, with a movie like Sonic being not great, but a solid start, one could hope another movie that continues from this could end up being better. They take the flaws of the first and turn it into something that ends up being similar, but also better in every way. Sometimes we get that, other times we don't. But even if a movie isn't the best ever, doesn't mean that a great sequel can't happen. Would Sonic 2 have the potential to get a good sequel? Well...
If these readings are accurate, he's here. I found him.
The first big reveal that appeared at the end of the Sonic movie was that Tails is officially going to be in the sequel. Only fitting. The little guy who made his debut in Sonic's second game gets to sideline him in the movie sequel. To make it even more promising, we know for sure now he's not going to look like a freak. His design is really good and accurate to the game. It went even further the closer the movie was coming out. A few things occurred to make me have even more faith in the sequel. One of them being the announcement of Knuckles. Hot damn. One of the coolest characters in the Sonic series, whether you're a longtime fan or not. Everyone loves this dude. And to make it better, he's played by the fucking man. Idris Elba plays Knuckles in this. The man who canceled the apocalypse, led the Suicide Squad, and was chief officer of Zootopia, is now the mighty Echidna Warrior. A must well-deserved follow-up from being, well... in that other movie we don't talk about. A great choice for the character, and the hype was cemented even further. Where the original Sonic movie posters sent me with fears of horrors that await, Sonic 2's first movie poster was hype as hell. Holy shit, the tornado! They're not playing here. We're getting the real Sonic movie we've been waiting for. Ideally, this was the kind of imagery I wanted to see when the thought of Sonic being in a movie came to mind. So in April of 2022, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came out to a success. And you know, it's honestly well deserved, as I think for what is the sequel to the movie that was initially going to be this, they treated us real good. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 starts out pretty simple, with Robotnik still being trapped on the Mushroom Planet and trying to escape, but he then comes across the legendary warrior Knuckles, who is on the search for the Master Emerald. Robotnik replies,
I'd be happy to show you the way.
Though when Sonic gets into the frame, the movie feels more or less the same as it was in the first, where we see Sonic doing some random shenanigans in the city. And it's play for laughs. More interaction with Tom the Cop, being now living with him for a while. We also get caught up with Sonic's antics living at home. We find out that Tom and his wife are going to a wedding for the sister in the last movie. It leads to Sonic being home alone and having fun. And for the most part, not too much improved from the first. However, the film really kicks into high gear once Sonic is visited by Robotnik. And this time, he brought a little friend with Knuckles. The two hit it off on a brutal fight as Knuckles matches Sonic's speed nearly, but is outweighed by his massive strength. It doesn't bowl well for Sonic, and it seems like he's losing. Until Miles Tails Prower shows up as someone who is looking out for Sonic on his own planet. He's a two-tailed fox who's great with gadget and is a pretty bright 8-year-old. So the two team up to find out the whereabouts of this Master Emerald Knuckles is referring to, while Knuckles and Eggman team up on the hunt for Sonic. And this is where the movie actually starts getting really good, if you are any bit invested in this series for as long as I have. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 ends up being a fairly good adventure movie that's about these characters going on a journey similar to the games. The plot is pretty much recycled from Sonic 3, as Knuckles is manipulated to think that Sonic is the bad guy by Robotnik, only for them to team up with Tails included in the mix. Yet it works because it gives you more of what you like to see in a Sonic movie, with the biggest thing being the characters in this. Sonic is still just as good as ever, and even a little better in some ways. I feel like Ben Schwartz is able to do more with this script, now that he's been more experienced playing the character. Yet his energetic and snarky personality really works for this hero. Sonic even learns about saving people being a priority as opposed to just causing mischief, and it leads to a decent character arc that actually ends up straightening his relationship with Knuckles later on. Tails is also on a whole other level in terms of faithfully adapting a video game character on the silver screen, as he might be one of the best executed, because this right here is Tails, a smart young kid who's trying to gain more confidence in himself, that's great with gadget, and is just as charmingly nice as ever. He looks up to Sonic like an older brother, and the dynamic between the two characters is perfect. I think the scene that cements it the most is when Sonic and him talk about how Tails had trouble growing up, and Sonic makes him feel like he's someone. That's the exact kind of dynamic the two have, and to see the two care for one another so well here is a major strength this movie has. On top of this character being well characterized and well designed, pretty much looking exactly like his game counterpart, he is also well performed. The person they got to voice Tails in this wasn't a child actor or a new coming young star, but instead voice actress Colleen O'Shaughnessy, who is known for voicing characters in Naruto, Danny Phantom, and most importantly, well, Tails. Yeah, they got the current voice of Tails to play the character in this, and that's awesome. Not to say another actor couldn't fulfill the role, as Tails has been performed by plenty of people before Colleen. Yet, I'm glad they went with this route for multiple reasons. Mainly because, well, it sounds so authentic. It makes it feel more real, like this is a proper Sonic the Hedgehog movie, to not only have Tails be characterized well, but performed by someone who played him countless of times before, and can do well with a decent script. For the most part, there is still such a novelty to seeing big movie adaptations of characters still voiced by their main voice actor. Even better is that this helps get Colleen to be more recognized, as voice actors often tend to get overshadowed by big celebrities in more popular movie projects. She deserves all the credit for this. Definitely one of the best decisions made for the film. Yet, ironically enough, one of the movie's other best decisions was the exact opposite of that. They did hire another celebrity for another actor. But goddamn, I am so glad that it's Mr. Idris Elba. This interpretation of Knuckles the Echidna is actually pretty awesome. Very faithful to the character, as he's the strong warrior that was part of a tribe wronged by Sonic's caregiver in the past. So, Knuckles is certainly out for Sonic in this, but he works in so many other ways. Another well-designed version of the character that one gripe I've heard about Knuckles' design in the past is that he's usually the same size as Sonic. Nothing wrong with that inherently, but some would argue that Knuckles needed a more toned look, considering how much he's known for his strength. We've seen designs that try to make him look stronger, but instead look like a weird tumor. But with this one, they made him look slightly more muscular than Sonic, just enough to where he doesn't look too alienated from his original design. Personality-wise, I've heard some complaints regarding the character, as some believe with the focus on comedy, they sort of dumb down the character of Knuckles. However, I disagree with that big time in terms of knowing who Knuckles is as a character. We've seen Knuckles been downgraded by being interpreted as the dumb one in other versions of Sonic.
There's no time like the present. Wait, there are presents? No.
Though, where those versions of Knuckles fail is that they focus too much on Knuckles being an idiot. Like, he's treated like a joke that just gets angry sometimes and doesn't get a lot of things. The difference here is that Knuckles does actually take himself seriously, as he is a mighty warrior who is strong, noble, and courageous. The issue is he doesn't really understand a lot of what makes the world outside of his own tribe work, leading him to misinterpret things very easily. The main character a lot of people have compared this version of Knuckles to is Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. And I would say that's accurate, as they work for the same reason. They're funny because of how seriously they take themselves. Like, they're completely unaware of metaphors, and with how earnest they are with that, it leads to them feeling more real in a sense.
Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I will catch it.
Yet, they're still legitimate tough characters that do manage to get an understanding towards the rest of the cast of the movie. Now, some might say, this isn't Knuckles, but I don't know where you're coming from, because this was always Knuckles. He's always been easily manipulated, and can be duped into things where he probably should have known better.
Knuckles, did you let him trick you again? Like you weren't? Smooth move, Knucklehead.
I mean, this guy canonically trusted Eggman in his first appearance, yet he isn't aware of it because of how legitimately confident he is as a guardian of the Master Emerald, with some skills attached to him. The reason why we dig Knuckles is because he is strong and badass in his own right, and I think this interpretation of the character is actually pretty perfect. Add to this even further is seeing these characters' dynamic, as it starts out how Knuckles and Sonic were known for in Sonic 3. They were rivals because of Knuckles' misdirection by Eggman, only to find out that Sonic is helping him, and they form a good bond over the course of the series. It's something that really helps makes this a good movie for fans of Sonic, and that's not even including all the little callbacks to the games and some fairly fitting sequences for these characters that are awesome to watch. More so than the first Sonic movie, they do a lot of fun callbacks to a ton of games of different generations of Sonic. Yet, they don't rely on them as much as other movies might for their own property. The series still managed to get its own lore here that still feels like they're trying to do its own thing without alienating the series too much, as if there is a change, it usually makes sense. Possibly one of the biggest I could think of is that the Chaos Emerald and the Master Emerald were always separate entities in the game, where here, the Chaos Emerald helped create the Master Emerald when they're combined. Never the thing in the game, but it actually does make sense. I mean, why not have them more related when there's an obvious connection in the first place? Sure, I still don't quite understand the deal with Longclaw, who briefly appears in this, but maybe they'll explain her more in the third movie. Either way, it changes it enough to where fans will notice but won't care because they're too fixated on seeing these characters be themselves and do new things in the mix of the occasional callback to the games. There's some great action sequences that really focus in on Sonic's speed, and even that whole dance sequence is kind of fun. Usually I'm not into sequences with a pop song dance number, but seeing Sonic and Tails jam out the Uptown Funk is actually really enjoyable to watch. It's because they feel like the characters we're used to. It is, at the moment, a pretty perfect experience for Sonic fans.
These rings.
So help me, Thomas!
Well, okay, almost perfect. There is a bit of an elephant in the room I have to address. There is a fault to this movie that has appeared a bit in the previous Sonic movie, and even other live-action adaptations of this caliber, and that is the human cast. Not all of them. Some of them do work okay here. The main point of note is still Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik / Eggman. I think he's given a lot more to do here, and his look is more akin to the games, even if it's still not the portly scientist we all know and love. But he does floss, and of course, what is Eggman without some sort of lackey? And surprisingly enough, Agent Stone has become sort of a fan favorite of the human cast. I think it's mostly due to how this dude is so weirdly in love with Robotnik that you can't help but be admired by his gay crush. Really, this issue comes from pretty much everyone else, as we actually do get a subplot of the wedding that Tom is going to. And yeah, these scenes don't do it for me. I guess the actors are doing a fine job playing it over the top, but as far as the humor goes, it's easily the weakest part of the movie. It's a lot of basic slapstick, but the real issue isn't so much that it's not funny, it's more so that it really does distract from the main appeal of the movie. Take it from someone who really likes this movie. These are the moments where you can go to the bathroom or fast forward, and I wouldn't blame you one bit, because we're not here for these characters, we're here for Sonic. And when it gets to these characters, it's exciting and exactly what we want. This, on the other hand, definitely feels like filler. And for being about 2 hours long, you could have easily cut some of this out. Especially when you see Sonic and Tails get captured, only for a good 15 minutes of this movie being focused on Wade's wife and her sister trying to save them without any of the characters we like. It might not actually be the worst of what we see in this series in terms of human focus, trust me. We'll get to that. But it is the sore spot of the movie. Some will point to this part as the moment that killed the movie for them. But not me. Why? Simple. Everything after that gets really good. You see Sonic, Eggman, and Knuckles go to these ancient ruins where the Master Emerald is, and it leads to, honestly, a really badass fight sequence between these two characters. Seriously, this is the kind of CGI action sequence that actually looks rad, and does have some emotional investment seeing these characters actually learn from one another. It obviously leads to Knuckles joining Sonic and Tails, but again, that is exactly what we were hoping for in this series, as we get this iconic trio having a camaraderie that we love seeing in the games, enhanced even further when Robotnik goes back into town and starts creating his own Eggman mech. And it's kind of awesome to see something like this in a full-fledged Sonic movie. It leads to an action sequence that, if my 10-year-old self saw this, I would be having the time of my life. Seeing Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles being this awesome third act sequence is the kind of feeling that Marvel fans got when seeing the Avengers together. Just seeing all of these guys translated so well in a sequence that has everything. Speed, great character interaction, Robotnik being hilariously evil, and even Supersonic. It's some great stuff. Okay, there is one thing that is missing. The only thing that could have enhanced this moment even further is if they included something like this. It ends how you would expect, but it's the kind of thing you wanted that was expected. Sonic defeats Eggman, and now has a better life with his pals of Tails and Knuckles, leading to more grand adventures later on. Sonic 2 ends on a really good note, and honestly, I'm kind of shocked to see Sonic, of all characters, get the first ever good video game movie. But yeah, with Sonic 2, I would say this is really good. I wouldn't quite say it's one of the best blockbusters or even something that 100% deserves a Best Picture nomination either, but it did exactly what it set out to do, making these characters work in a movie that's very fun and entertaining. If I was a kid, I would have loved this. And honestly, I think the series so far is really great for kids. It might be a live action adaptation, but it actually doesn't horrify children like the Disney remakes, and instead just manages to get kids more into Sonic. This movie managed to be better received than the first, with also a better box office too, and it's well deserved. As far as sequels go, this is exactly what I would like to see a sequel do. Be a massive improvement of the first in every single way. Now, when I say this, I don't think this is quite on the level of the very best sequels of all time. It's not quite Terminator 2, Empire Strikes Back, The Dark Knight, or Spider-Verse level of quality in terms of being a sequel to a great movie that surpasses the level of quality we expect from cinema. However, in a scene where we get sequels that don't even come close to being an improvement of the first, even if the first was good, I'm honestly appreciative that we got an improvement with this franchise progressing. For it to be Sonic, the series that I'm so used to seeing ragged on, get this good treatment is a pleasant surprise. And it just makes me hope more so for the future of this character in movie form. Now, of course, with the second movie being a smash with fans all over, we were ultimately going to close it off with a trilogy. Believe me, there's going to be a lot to talk about then. But before we get to the third installment of this Sonic movie series, there was something else coming out in the mix that was also sounding very promising. You see, here's the thing. You can't have Sonic 3 without Knuckles. That's right, Knuckles got his own spin-off TV series. This time we get a short 6-episode TV series that focuses on the movie's interpretation of Knuckles the Echidna. First hearing this after seeing how good Sonic 2 was, I was genuinely excited for this. Knuckles is an awesome character that deserves a good proper spin-off, and this new version played by Idris Elba was a version I wanted to see more of. This being a series was also a way of making Sonic into a cinematic universe in the same way Marvel has in the past. Yet this is just one series, so I don't have to worry about oversaturation. And given that they want to do more stuff with Sonic, this Knuckles show could bring in some awesome elements from the games into the movies. And we could see more callbacks and interpretations that we have so much seen in Sonic 2. Thus, this leads to the Knuckles show being the main show I was looking forward to watching on Paramount Plus, since honestly there's not really a whole lot else to watch on that service, if I'm being frank. When the trailers dropped, it looked pretty good. I liked how good of a production it was looking to be, and they even gave Knuckles that hat from the OVA. A few months later, the show comes out, and it's not all that good. Yeah. This series ended up being a wasted opportunity. It's honestly a bummer after seeing how good Sonic 2 was. Even with hearing some of the negative reviews when the series premiered, I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt. Especially because this is one of those series that actually feels the opposite of most series, where they start out meh, but get good by the end. Instead, this is a show that starts out really promising and fun, only to turn into kind of dull and uninteresting. I almost wanted to make a video about this series when it came out because of how baffling some of the decisions they made with this were. Yet, I waited to just kill a few birds with one stone by covering it with the other Sonic movies. There's a decent amount to say about Knuckles, as this was not the show I wanted, or was even expecting to dislike. So sorry fans of this series, but this is the dark spot of the Sonic movie franchise, if you ask me. Though I guess now I should dive into what exactly makes this show not all that good. Especially since, honestly, the first episode is kinda good. It's the only episode directed by Jeff Fowler of the previous Sonic movies, and you see a lot of what made the movies fun in this. It has a decent setup where we see Knuckles at Tom's place causing a ruckus, and him having to discover that he has to learn more about himself. So he goes on a road trip with Wade, the other cop from the Sonic movies, on this trip of self-discovery. Simple premise. And as stated, the first episode is funny, and does have some decent setup to Knuckles becoming a great warrior, with Idris Elba still giving a great vocal performance as the character. He's even boosted a bit more by having Knuckles' grandfather, Chief Pakamak, as a character. Here voiced by the legendary Christopher Lloyd, no less. Watching the first episode, I was kind of confused to some of the negative reception because this is solid. Surely they couldn't have fucked up that badly. Well, that truth becomes a slow burn, as this is one of those shows where the more it goes on, the more the flaws are apparent. What's the biggest problem with this series? Well, quite frankly, there's a surprising and unfortunate lack of Knuckles in this show. Yeah, this was kind of shocking considering that the Sonic movies did a decent job balancing out its human cast, despite neither film being necessarily perfect with it. Though, hey, wasn't one of my favorite series in recent memory one that had the title character surprisingly absent with Scott Pilgrim Takes Off? So, What makes the Knuckles show so much worse about it? Well, with Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, despite not having much of Scott, it made up for it by focusing on so many other characters that needed more development and focus for what they're trying to come across. Honestly, the Knuckles show could have been salvaged a bit from a lack of Knuckles just by having whatever else that would feel necessary to this show that's from the Sonic series. After all, this show is supposedly going to set up Sonic 3, isn't it? So surely they're going to introduce some cool things associated with Knuckles, right? So what did they focus on? I mean, we already got his tribe. Do we see more of them? Do we get an appearance from Tikal? Makes sense since he's the most recognizable echidna in the Sonic series. Maybe the echidnas from Sonic Chronicles to satisfy all 3 fans of that game. How about maybe introducing Rouge the Bat? I mean, they're setting up Sonic Adventure 2 motifs for the next movie, and they both have a strong history together, so that should be expected. Or how about the Chaotix? It would be perfect, not just because these characters are awesome, but they're already a part of the main Knuckles spin-off game. Any of that would have made sense to see in this show. Yet, the show itself, we get none. None of that. Yeah, you know what gets focused on instead? This guy.
What would you like on your bagel?
Yeah, the Wade character. Now, in the other movies, he was fine. Not really that great of a comic relief, but I've seen worse. But when I said he was fine, I didn't really want to see him focus more on. If he was maybe a more interesting character and was just a bit funnier, maybe this could have worked, but the whiplash of not getting enough Knuckles really rears its ugly head as the series goes on with a plethora of baffling moments. Episode 2 is probably the second best episode, as it's just more establishing the other conflicts of the series, including the 2 agents trying to find Knuckles, and the Russian bad guy who worked for Robotnik. It has some okay moments, and you get a decent amount of Knuckles here. Episode 3 is where things start to take a turn for the worse, as we're mostly fixated on Wade's family, and they're not all that great. The sister is kind of annoying and not funny, and it just reeks of a strange misdirect of the show. But I don't think this episode is terrible. It's just not that great. It does redeem itself a bit by having some decent Knuckle moments. The highlights are when he actually interacts with the family in some kind of sweet and humorous way.
I'm now the last of my tribe.
Oh. Our tribe has been through some tough times too. Minus the giant owls. He's basically Jewish.
But then we get to episode 4. Oh man. This series certainly had a fucking episode with this one. One that I feel would make or break the show for a lot of people, as it might be, without a doubt, the strangest fucking thing I have ever seen in the Sonic franchise. And that's saying something. Episode 4 is so bizarre, and also is where the series starts to suffer from its biggest problem the most here, as Knuckles is barely in this episode. Yeah, he only appears at like the very end and the beginning. So what happens in this episode? Well, Wade gets captured and comes across a dude named Jack Sinclair, a bounty hunter that's after him and Knuckles. Could have gone with Fang the Sniper, but I digress. But then it leads to Wade having a vision of what he needs to do. And it leads to...
Warrior's Quest. Hello, Wade.
This batshit insane moment. Yeah, it becomes a rock opera, with Wade wearing a Knuckles costume and him living through a bunch of set pieces that Knuckles is supposed to be there apparently. And he sings with the help of Michael Bolton?
Michael Bolton, everyone!
This is... what the fuck? Like, I don't know what the hell I'm watching anymore. But weirdly enough, while I totally get why people would hate this episode, and it can easily be seen as a big middle finger to fans of Knuckles, wanting him to be focused on in his own damn series, there's also a part of me that actually kind of loves the sequence. It's just so crazy and totally out there that I can't help but admire this wacky idea coming into full fruition. And to their credit, for as strange as it is, there is a decent production level to it. Some of the sets are neat, and it even has some unironically fun moments. My favorite sequence is when Pac-Man appears as a Muppet.
I never...
Admittedly, I admired the production. But as a Sonic fan, did anyone wanted something like this in a series about Knuckles the Echidna? This does detour the initial appeal of the series in a negative way that feels wasted when you think back of what they could have brought into attention to this series in a creative way. I'll give them an A for effort for creativity with this, but it's also not anything close to what the assignment of the series actually was. So I can't say this was a good decision. But you know what the worst part is? That's not even the strangest thing about this episode. There was something that broke the straw on the camel's back to making this the most baffling, strange decision this show has made. The truth of the matter is, they do call back to a memorable Sonic game in this episode. That's not just the basic classic games. It was something I was most curious about with this episode when seeing that the title is called The Flames of Disaster. Flames of Disaster, huh? Now, where have I heard that in the Sonic series before? Wait a minute.
I've come here to obtain the secret of the Flames of Disaster from you.
No, you didn't.
They come from an eternal life form that we cannot truly defeat, the Flames of Disaster, known as Iblis.
The Flames of Disaster!
So, the one game they felt it was important to give a major callback to is certainly one of the most memorable Sonic games, alright. They decided to call back to Sonic 06. Yeah, Sonic 06. The game that single-handedly ruined Sonic's reputation. The game that expected to be the biggest cutting-edge reboot of the series for the next generation of consoles and turned into a rush-out mess that turned Sonic into more of a laughingstock than he already was. You had all of these games to choose from, and you went with this one. You went with the one that had Knuckles getting stuck on the fucking walls.
What is this? What is this?
And it's not just in the title, as the episode is all about Wade trying to reenact the moment when Knuckles took down the Flames of Disaster, which is Iblis. Iblis is the fire god from Sonic 06. You know, the big flame monster that you kill by jumping on his head when he makes a funny face, and also deals with one of the most boring boss fights in any video game ever. I'm not sure why, or how, or what was the process in this mindset, but yeah, this is hands down one of the most baffling decisions they ever made for a Sonic movie project like this. Yet, despite all of that, it's actually not the worst episode of the series like some may claim. Oh no, that honor goes to episode 5. Same problem as before. Knuckles is barely fucking here. But at least the rock opera was kinda interesting. This is just a generic bowling tournament with Wade and his dad bowling against one another. At this point, I'm just checked out because this is honestly pretty boring and doesn't add anything. That's why this show feels so wasted, as you really could have expanded upon this universe they're trying to do. Even if they weren't able to afford Knuckles and Idris Elba for the whole series, maybe either limit your episodes or make the other stuff still connect with Knuckles or be interesting in its own right. Honestly, you probably would have saved a bit more money by just having it be about Knuckles without all this other expensive shit that appears in the show. The stuff that doesn't deal with Knuckles has barely any ties with him to begin with, and it's just not interesting. I want to watch this show about Knuckles, not this stupid bowling tournament. And it's not like Big Lebowski. If it was like Big Lebowski, it would be fucking cool. But no, it's just so boring.
And you know what? Today we have a bunch of amazing competitors.
Oh my god, I don't fucking care. When are they gonna get to the fireworks factory? Oh. You get to the final episode, which is a bit better. There are a couple action scenes with Knuckles that are fun. Even a nice little sequence dealing with Saturday Night's Alright by Elton John. But the damage was already done, and it still focuses way too much on Wade and his stupid bowling. It did give birth to the Flame of Disaster meme.
The flames of disaster!
Yeah, don't remind me of that mindfuck again. It leads to Wade and Knuckles improving as warriors and characters. But was the journey worth it? Honestly, not really. Outside of a good start and some bizarre moments that are so weird I can't help but say it was worth seeing, by the end of it, this series felt extremely underwhelming. I wanted to like this, I really did, but I say Knuckles deserves better as the radical character he is. If you want a good TV series from last year that was a spin-off to a 2022 movie, I say watch The Penguin instead. As for Knuckles, it's not the worst Sonic thing, but it's certainly one of the most disappointing things in a while from the series. You're actually better off playing Knuckles Chaotix instead of watching this. Even that means buying a Sega 32X to play it. Yet, I honestly didn't want to give up hope just yet. Now, Sonic 3 was still on the horizon, and even despite the Knuckles show not seemingly being tied into the third film as much as we wanted, I was still interested. Partially because the team behind the second movie was more so going to be behind this, with Jeff Fowler still directing. So, that definitely made me more interested. But even more importantly, while I usually don't get into fan hype for movies as much as I used to, this was an exception. As much as I wanted a certain Sonic rival to appear in the third movie, they had other plans. They had something set up in Sonic 2 with the return of the Olive Garden guy.
That day, Guardian Units of Nations was born.
G-U-N, seriously?
Gun, yeah.
Oh yeah, Gun. And every Sonic the Hedgehog fan knows that Gun means one thing and one thing only. A tie-in to a possible iconic game. It's even more so revealed with kind of a hype post-credit scene with the only way this had to go that could lead to the ultimate hype Sonic fans have wanted for a movie like this.
My God. Project Shadow.
Yeah, the third movie was going to tackle the game that made history in this long-running franchise. Sonic Adventure 2 is an iconic game to die-hard Sonic fans, and 2,000 kids everywhere. Sure, you can argue it's not the most well-polished game. It has parts not as fun as others, and you can argue that the sound mixing is bad, which...
Freeze! Put your hands up in the air and get off the ground!
I'll take care of the police while you try and find a way.
Yeah, it kinda is. But the level of hype you can get from this one video game alone, especially if you're a kid, and this is your first experience to modern Sonic on the GameCube, or Dreamcast if you played it when it first came out, is simply unmatched. It's one of those games where you just had to be there. You just had to be there for Sonic jumping off a helicopter and transition to the most iconic first 7 notes to a first level theme next to Mario. You had to have been there to see Shadow for the first time, and this is what got fans really excited. Yeah, there is a part of me that would have been fine with Metal Sonic just as much, but Shadow was a bit more of a popular choice, and for a reason. You can argue that he's edgy, but he's just one of those characters that gain more popularity over time. Honestly, I'm glad that's the case for Shadow the Hedgehog. It's cool to see a character like him get this amount of popularity. I don't see why I doubted him in the past. I mean, I don't think anyone compelled me to realize how cool of a character Shadow is or anything. Not at all. Not at all. Although the real question, I guess, is who's going to voice Shadow the Hedgehog in this movie? Obviously, his addition was going to raise some eyebrows for Sonic fans, but it seems like they were eyeing for a big star to play Shadow, much like Idris Elba as Knuckles. So, who was it going to be? Some say Adam Driver was a good choice. There were also rumors that Hayden Christensen was going to play the character. Hell, some even thought it was going to be Jared Leto. Thank God it wasn't that. If you ask me though, I say I had a personal pick for who I think should have been cast as the iconic Shadow. What other actor could replicate 2000 teenage angst as well as Shadow. How about the star of another film that came out the same year as Sonic 2 and was even more hype?
Thursday, October 31st.
Yeah, Robert Pattinson as Shadow the Hedgehog. That sounds like a match made in heaven. Take it from someone who was in that Twilight hate crowd from back in the day. Pattinson has really proven himself to be a really great actor. Not only having a variety of different roles, but also doing well with an angst look. So when seeing him play a more dark, gritty Batman, I'm like, yeah, this is Shadow the Hedgehog. This voice would fit the character perfectly.
Hidden in the chaos is the element, waiting to strike like snakes.
And don't tell me it can't work. You're telling me the man who played Edward Cullen isn't angsty enough to play the edgiest video game character of all time? It just leads to my one request. Please, Sega and Paramount, make the man who was Batman in 2022 be Shadow the Hedgehog. And you know, in a way, that wish was granted.
That better be a licensed toy or I will freak out.
Yeah, Keanu! Which, honestly, not a bad choice either for this character.
You are a national treasure.
And I can't complain too much about Pattinson not being in this. At least he got to work with Bong Joon-ho instead, which I'd say is a pretty good trade-off. Also, side note, you guys should check out Mickey 17. That movie's awesome. As for Keanu Reeves, with him being the lovable badass he is, people were very interested in his portrayal of Sonic's most popular rival. I'm also just fascinated by this just for the sake of how I wonder how this news would have been received back in the 2000s. Because much like Sonic the Hedgehog, there was a good time in the mid-2000s where Keanu Reeves was kind of considered a joke. Yeah, everyone acts like he's their favorite actor now, but in the 2000s, there were plenty of people who ragged on his career and just made a bunch of jokes about how bad of an actor he was. Oh, he can't act. The only good movies he was in were The Matrix and Bill and Ted. You've heard a lot of that, but admittedly, not to say it wasn't overblown, cause it was, but looking back,
I doubted everything. Even my mind. I was impotent with fear.
Early day Keanu Reeves' acting wasn't the best. There were plenty of performances from him where he wasn't quite the strongest part, maybe playing things a bit too stoic. But as with most actors, he did improve later on for certain roles. So what exactly changed to make him the most well-liked actor in the modern age? Honestly, I say it was thanks to a little movie you might have heard of called... Yeah, John Wick, the little movie that could. I remember it coming out, but never saw it until a few years later when the second movie came out. When more and more people discovered that movie in particular, it went from, oh, Keanu Reeves, to, whoa, Keanu Reeves is the shit! So yeah, basically what I'm saying, it does make sense for someone with an arsenal like Shadow to be voiced by Mr. Wick. Anyway, we gotta talk about a third movie that just came out. So, it's finally here. 5 years after dreading the first movie, thinking it was going to be the worst thing ever. 4 years after the first managed to be a fun time. 2 years after the second improved so much of what the first established. This third movie had a lot to live up to. But on December 20th, 2024, Sonic fans found out that these madmen actually did it. They actually fucking did it. They made possibly the best video game theatrical film adaptation of all time, in this reviewer's opinion. A movie that's fairly competent as a movie that ended up entertaining audiences of all different backgrounds, along with being a faithful adaptation to the game it is trying to represent. And of all games it's an adaptation of, it's Sonic Adventure 2, which is probably the most unbelievable miracle I could have ever witnessed as a Sonic and movie fan. They couldn't make a good movie based on Sonic. They couldn't even get Transformers or Justice League right when making a proper movie adaptation on the first try. So there was no way Sonic, the most mocked franchise, was going to get anything half as good. But I am glad I am so wrong, because Sonic 3 is the Sonic movie I have always dreamed of happening in the best of ways. It was rewarded greatly too, as it managed to be the best reviewed of the series, and also the biggest box office hit of the series. I mean, it was probably easy for that movie to make a lot of money, given that... Wait, what movie was this in competition during its opening weekend? Oh wait, it managed to be more successful than the stupid Mufasa live-action prequel? Excuse me for a second. Get fucked, Disney remake. Get fucked. Good riddance. Karma is so good sometimes. Anyway, let's talk about the movie itself. Sonic 3 actually does live up to the hype, as it's hands down the best of the three movies, even being a significant improvement from Sonic 2. It comes the closest to being a great movie, even if it's still not objectively speaking the best overall film in general. But honestly, in terms of being a great blockbuster film that delivers on what it promises, Sonic 3 definitely feels more so on that level. It mostly feels on the level of the very best of what the Marvel movies had to offer, where it is faithful to its source material that manages to entertain and satisfy in the best of ways, especially for those who are heavily invested in these characters. As while it does a few things different as expected, it took the basis of Sonic Adventure 2's story and adjusted it to fit within their adaptation of Sonic, as the story focuses on Shadow being an experiment hidden for around 50 years, coming back from his sleep, and now he's confused and wants to take vengeance on the world for taking the only thing he cared about, which is Maria. Of course, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles are informed of this, and it leads to them teaming up with Eggman to stop this bigger threat. But things get way more complicated later on, as Gerald Robotnik is here, Eggman's grandfather, who was involved in the discovery of Shadow. So of course family reunited, and it becomes a big adventure to save the world, and for Shadow to maybe have a bit of a redemption arc too. In the film that is easily the most fixated on being a Sonic movie, yeah, I think that should be pretty mandatory for this series. Unlike the previous two movies, the human characters don't feel as much fixated on. They're mostly taking a back seat being there for like a few moments here and there, but it's very sparse and doesn't last long. Like that whole wedding sequence that happened in the second movie that went on for like 20 minutes, there's just one moment between those characters in this movie that lasts for about 5 minutes. Some would say they prefer not having it at all, but for whatever reason, studios still find them necessary, so I guess you have to compromise somewhat. But it's not a big deal, as this movie has the most we see of the characters we know and love. The personalities from the previous two movies are fully intact, and we see more of their camaraderie with one another. Sonic's a great leader, Tails is the responsible smart one, and Knuckles is the no-nonsense muscle, and they all complement each other quite well. The movie has a lot of those moments where we see these characters learn from one another, and also have great back and forth, thanks to a lot of the voice acting and dialogue being very fun to listen to. Not to mention, much like Sonic 2, this movie looks awesome. Like in terms of translating this kind of game into a big film, this looks as good as you can get. The movie has a lot of color and cool camera work to make it a spectacle for the eyes, especially during those action sequences, which they outdid themselves big time here. It's mostly an action film with these characters that are likable, and sometimes you want to see that kind of character dynamics in a movie that's meant to be a fun time at the movies. There's a ton of callbacks to the games, more so than in Sonic 2, with a variety of different references that I think are fun to see. It's definitely fan service, and I gotta admit, it can be tiresome nowadays when movies utilize it to where it's just that and nothing else. As fun as Marvel can be, it is starting to wear thin to hear constant callbacks to older films that we're already aware of. But I'm sorry, when Sonic in this movie says,
Talk about low-budget flights. No food or movies? We're out of here.
That might have been the most giddy I've been for a movie like that in a while. However, it goes to show that sometimes fun movies are not a bad thing, and this movie definitely portrays that, and at some points, goes even further. Not to say it's perfect, some of the human aspects still feel tacked on, despite luckily not being a huge portion. It does kind of make them feel a little bit more pointless here, especially Wade, who gets one brief appearance. It's nothing more than him making a quick cameo. Though I'm honestly glad this is the case, as no offense to the actor, but after that shit show, I can't handle a subplot where this duo is teaming up with Shadow to take down Eraser Jim from Sonic and the Secret Rings. Oh come on, you know they would do some shit like that. I can't complain too much though, because there is one character they mostly have that's a human actor. Thankfully, it's the one we love to egg on. Dr. Robotnik in this movie is back, and played once again by Jim Carrey. I know some weren't quite expecting it because some presumed he died in the last movie.
No one could have survived that crash. He's toast.
But I figure, no way. Think you can get rid of Jim Carrey that easily? Besides, even if it wasn't a big name actor like Jim Carrey playing the role, it's freaking Dr. Robotnik / Eggman. You'd think they would make a Sonic trilogy and not include one of gaming's most iconic villains. I'm glad the character is still here, because he's always a fun, consistent villain for Sonic to go up against, whether it be Sonic Adventure 2, the newer games, or the peak performance that is The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. This character is usually quite fun. Jim Carrey gets the most screen time of the human cast, and his comedic take on the character is even more fun to watch here than it was in the previous two movies. One thing to note that's an added bonus is that Carrey is in a duo role, with him also playing Gerald Robotnik, the character from SA2, which is interesting as surprisingly enough, neither Gerald or Eggman interacted in the games, despite being related. In Adventure 2, Gerald was long dead, so it was just Eggman. We never see two Eggmans at once within the series. Well, okay, we did get that in Sonic Rush, with an alternate universe Eggman known as Eggman Nega.
What'd you say?
Nega! Nega! Get your mind out of the gutter. But that wasn't Eggman having a relative, just a version from an alternate dimension. Here, we get two Robotniks. And it's fun to see Jim Carrey play off against himself in a very comedic way. And another reason why this ends up being the best of the trilogy in terms of Eggman, they made him fat!
Playing congas on my big fat belly.
Okay, he's honestly not that fat in the grand scheme of things, but it's better than nothing, I guess. So yeah, it's clear that they focus on a lot of the stuff that should be focused on here. Shit that ties into the games. Not the stuff made for the movies solely. Though, we still don't know what the hell is up with Longclaw. Yeah, they mention this owl once, and we never get anything else. Man, talk about an afterthought to one of the strangest things they could have added in this movie series. Oh well, who cares? However, we have to move on from Robotnik, because we all know there's one character I should talk about, and I dare not forget him, as it's time to talk about one of the most popular characters in the whole Sonic series. Shadow the Hedgehog being in this film definitely raised some eyebrows for Sonic fans, and the execution of him is done really well. As stated earlier, Keanu wasn't my first pick to play the character, and I still feel as a whole he worked. I think I leaned a bit more towards Pattinson, because even despite Shadow's angst, he's still supposed to be in spirit to feel around Sonic's age, maybe slightly older. Keanu's voice might be a bit too deep for my liking at points, but it's nothing too much to gripe about. I mean, we have a 50-year-old black man voicing Knuckles the Echidna, who's supposed to be 15 years old in terms of age. An older actor voicing Shadow is fine, but more so than that, Reeves is often good at portraying angst in a lot of his roles. And Shadow is the definition of angsty edgelord, so he portrays a lot of that with confidence. But as far for the character himself, they do a good job adapting the backstory of him into this movie, as Shadow's bitterness comes from the fact that he was not only created for evil, but the one thing he connected with, Maria, gets tragically killed. So he wants vengeance. A darker storyline compared to what we were used to in games like Sonic 3D Blast. And some might say the game itself is hard to take seriously because of that contrast with the heavy stuff, with a walking cartoon hedgehog. You would think a movie version of that would be more ridiculous, yet they surprisingly balance things pretty well, between the more lighthearted moments and the serious ones. Usually when it's on Shadow, it's more character building stuff, with some funny moments here and there.
We'll make guac. Revenge guac.
There's definitely changes to the story, as like I mentioned earlier, Jared Robotnik was long gone in the game itself, and the Bio-Lizard is not a thing in this movie. There's a small callback to it with Shadow watching an old B-movie, but we don't get some final confrontation with this lizard. To be fair, I'm not surprised with how out there it is to connect a hedgehog with a lizard. I bet the execs were like, look, we're already dealing with a bunch of cartoony animals. Let's not make this more inaccessible for casual movie audiences. There is one element in Sonic 3 that actually does heighten Shadow's story a bit further in the movie compared to how it's even done in the games. Weirdly enough, I actually think this movie improves a major aspect to Shadow's character, and that is his dynamic with Maria Robotnik. Now, Maria in Sonic Adventure 2 was the main motivation for Shadow to want revenge on the world, only to realize that her wish was more so for Shadow to help people, more than anything else. And does add to the tragic nature of his character for him to see someone he loves so much that's so innocent lose their own life. Yet, I'll be the first to admit, I don't think there's a lot of depth to Maria as a character. That's not to say it isn't sad to see her go, but when it comes to Shadow and her's dynamic, we don't really see a lot of them together. When we do, it's mostly just Maria being a nice girl, which of course it's far from a bad thing, yet it's a little simplistic in terms of seeing these characters interact, especially when one of these characters is heavily motivated by the other's loss. The movie improves on this dynamic as we do see Maria in this, and not only do we get a lot more time between her and Shadow, but a little more than just a typical nice, friendly girl. We see that she's kind of rebellious on this space colony, not to an extreme degree, but we do see her sneak around the Ark. We see that she does a lot of fun and exciting activities with Shadow that an average strict parent would find dangerous. And they bond over the kind of rebellious music they listen to of that time period. It makes Maria a bit more interesting, while still keeping her as this really sweet girl. Plus, it makes sense for Shadow to develop some of his edge through the main person he considered a friend. So I welcome this change big time for the movie. With the other big change made is how Maria gets killed, as they made it seem more like a freak accident, where the original story made it very brutal for an E10 plus game.
Maria!
Makes sense they changed it, cause yeah, it seems a little too brutal for a kid's movie to get a kid character axed off like that. But let's be real. We all know the real reason why they changed that moment in particular. They didn't want to deal with this shit in the theaters. Yeah, Sonic fans are weird. But this movie, more often than not, delivers for a lot of things for the fans. Of course, any fight with Sonic and Shadow is a strong highlight of the movie. You thought the Knuckles fight was great? You ain't seen nothing. Especially with one of the most epic finales I've seen in the theater in quite some time. Though there's one last thing to mention about Sonic 3 before I get to the final moments of this movie. something I've kind of neglected with the previous two movies, and that is the music. As the previous two movies had a score by Junkie XL, and it's fine, not horrible, but kind of a forgettable standard movie soundtrack. Not to say this guy can't contribute to a good soundtrack, but the Sonic movies weren't one of his strong suits, with just sort of a standard score. The real issue that many are realizing is that Sonic is a franchise that is surprisingly known for its music. Classic or newer, a Sonic game can likely have some of the best video game music you may ever hear. The issue is, the only bit of Sonic music to appear in the movies is just a few references to Green Hill Zone. Which is fine and all, I get it, it's iconic, but I feel like for a series known for its music, there's more than just Green Hills. Yes, I know, I sound like a typical Sonic fan complaining about the overuse of Green Hill Zone. What else is new? Especially since this is also a problem in general, where movies based on iconic properties just fail to include the iconic music that it's known for. I get that you want to mix things up sometimes, and you don't want to over-rely on pre-existing music either, but sometimes they don't include any music from the series at any point. Like, why not hear the Transformers theme song in the live-action Transformers movie? It feels worse to neglect them altogether, cause when done right, it can make for some hype moments. Like, wasn't it hype to hear the Godzilla theme during parts of Godzilla -1? Or hearing the Rainbow Connection in The Muppets 2011? Sometimes it's satisfying to see it done in a grand, cool way to pay tribute to the series as a whole. There was a silver lining that was giving me hope that this was going to be improved within the next movie, as the Super Mario Bros. Movie came out in between the time of Sonic 2 and 3, and was a much bigger success than any of the Sonic movies. Though I was hoping the success of that movie was going to have this team take notice, because if there was one thing the Mario movie got right, it was the music.
Hop in.
Okay, when they weren't needlessly having licensed songs be added into the film at the last second. I get it's a major complaint that most focus on, as I agree, it's unnecessary, especially when we've heard these songs in like 200 movies prior to this. We'll never top Shrek 2's use of Holding Out for a Hero. Stop it. It's not going to happen. What does stand out to me with this flaw is the fact that they did it at all, because for the most part, Mario had a lot more moments where they called back to music of so many different Mario games and eras. Hearing this kind of music in a big movie is awesome to listen to, and feels right. Just being able to see them go on Rainbow Road through carts, and this music from the SNES game plays. It feels so satisfying. So with that in mind, I had confidence that Sonic 3 could make the right choices, and it could lead to some incredible movie moments. Let's face it, Sonic Adventure 2 has one of the most hyped video game soundtracks I have ever heard. That promise was fulfilled within the first few minutes of the movie. Yes, they're already including SA2 motifs in the score. We get actual callbacks to the music of the Sonic games. Mostly SA2, but it's still awesome to hear it. Not just the typical live and learn theme. We get other music too, like a brief moment of Eggman's theme.
What do you want?
And even the classic Sonic Victory tune. You know, the one from Sonic 3?
I remain the undefeated speed champion of all time! Yes! And the crowd goes wild!
I am so happy to hear that here. Thus it leads to the final moments with Sonic and Shadow. After a good heart-to-heart, you finally hear it.
You can't fix it on your own.
Holy shit. I didn't think this was possible, man. I wasn't even thinking at any point I get something that faithfully recreated one of the pinnacle games I played growing up. I haven't burned out or seen any potential franchise go to waste. There was no way in hell a Sonic movie with a trailer almost as shitty as the Lion King remake would get any chance of having a faithful adaptation. But fucking A, man. These mad people did it. A great video game adaptation, and it's Sonic Adventure 2. And this sequence is just a top tier movie moment for a Sonic fan like myself. Action-packed, full of great character dynamics, and a hype soundtrack. The satisfaction Marvel fans had at the end of Endgame was felt here for me. Such a great experience witnessing this kind of stuff on the big screen. God, I love movies. After that, we get another neat finale sequence that involves a sacrifice by both Shadow and Eggman. It's very akin to SH2's final moments where Shadow has to save the world because that's what Maria wanted. He knows people like her can still have a spirit for people to grow, thus leading him to be gone. Eggman also sacrificing himself within the explosion. Some say Carrie is done, and I might believe it more so for a trilogy that he can cap this performance off. But we'll see if this character comes back from an explosion like that. We'll see, but it does lead to a very sweet ending, with the three heroes reminiscing on their adventure, leading to new adventures in the future. Of course they're going to make a Sonic 4, especially with Shadow being teased as still alive. Yeah, these hedgehogs don't die that easily. Although I have to admit, as much as I do like this series continuing, even after this, I do miss the days of simply being a trilogy and that's it. Nowadays, with so many reboots and revivals of old properties, we rarely get a simple trilogy anymore. And I wish that was more common today. I'd be perfectly fine with this Sonic series being a trilogy, but they do still set up a fourth movie here. I'll still see it, don't get me wrong, but lately post-credit scenes haven't gotten me that excited for future films as they used to for big blockbusters. With how common they are nowadays, it's hard to get that excited for them. So, I'm not even sure if Sonic could find a way to get me that excited for a post-credit scene again. Is that my boy? They did it! Holy shit! They fucking did it! Metal Sonic, the coolest motherfucking bad guy, is now officially in this movie. I've been waiting for him since the damn first movie. Now he's here, and he looks glorious.
It's hard to copy perfection.
Holy fuck, there's more of them? Now this is getting out of hand. And of course, Amy Rose. You gotta have her. Finally, some girls in this club. Holy shit, the Sonic CD hype for the fourth movie is real. Hot damn, I am psyched to see Metal Sonic taking action again, as he is the best. But still not as good as Shadow the Hedgehog, if I'm still being honest. Okay, good, he's gone. Now that with that out of the way, what overall conclusion can I make about the Sonic trilogy? Well, it's a pretty fun movie series. But I think there's a particular reason why I still appreciate this movie more than the average movie lover. A lot of people would argue that these movies aren't anything that special and are kind of typical kids' movies. They say there are a lot better movies out there that you can watch instead. And to a certain extent, there's some truth to that. The 2020s have been filled with plenty of amazing films, despite other disappointments occurring this decade so far. Thoughtful films like Everything Everywhere All at Once, Poor Things, and The Substance, peak blockbusters like The Batman, Barbie, and Oppenheimer, and even the realm of kids films. Fantastic pieces of art with stuff like Spider-Verse 2, Puss in Boots 2, and Nimona. As much as I really enjoy these movies, I don't think Sonic 3 is close to quite that level of quality. However, it doesn't have to be. The Sonic movies still work as a way of introducing these characters to a new audience, in a very entertaining movie series with a likable cast of characters. It's a neat thing to see people, young and old, still get attached to this property, because I'll be blunt. For a long time, there have been times I definitely felt alone as a Sonic fan. I know it's kinda oddly cliche to associate Sonic with autism, but as a kid growing up with that, I found it hard to socialize. Sonic was the main game series I liked, and for a while, it just seemed like a lot of people moved on. People felt Sonic was just a kid's thing, and I had to grow up because this is just a dumb, stupid game about a weird blue hedgehog. Yet, I didn't want to give up on the series, but it was disheartening to see a character I adore so near and dear to my heart just to get rejected because he wasn't considered cool anymore. Yet, at the same time though, I'm still happy that I kept my faith in this character, because nowadays, I don't feel quite as alone on Sonic. Why? Cause through the help of knowing so many friends who did share that same experience of growing up with this series, whether it be in real life or the internet, Sonic was an easier thing to connect with later on, and I've grown through so many experiences with this character that were unforgettable, whether it be at cons, dealing with a great new game, concert experiences, or in this case, just awesome movie-going experiences that meant the world to a movie buff like me. Whatever it is, even if Sonic haters do exist, there's more love for the character than ever before. And I think because Sonic does represent a kind of hope that we love to see. To see a character so optimistic and heroic be ridiculed and mocked by the mainstream for the longest time, only for his presence to be something more people can share the love with. Sure, you can argue that some of the Sonic fans can be cringe. Trust me, I know. I've seen the worst of it. But one thing that Sonic does help with is learning to be yourself. And he's a character that I think more people relate to in that regard than they would initially think. A super radical character who's way past cool, and I've always been happy to have so many positive memories with and seeing him get the respect and love he deserves after a rough patch in his time. It just proves to me that there's still hope for better things. In a world where it can feel bleak and depressing, I think we need these reminders that we need each other and we can do anything. Seeing Sonic go from a joke to a beloved success makes me still hopeful that things can improve if we keep a good mindset throughout. Like this guy right here. If a little blue hedgehog encourages us to live and learn, then we should take his advice and keep on running.
What are you, some kind of adrenaline junkie? Must be rough being slow all the time. Tell you what, today is your lucky day.
Get in! I'm on your side!
I'm sorry, who are you?
really glad you're here, Tails.
I'm glad I'm here too, Sonic.
You were right about one thing. This ends now.
You don't have to be alone anymore.
The light shines, even though the stars are.
You always have a choice. This is our moment.
And that was the Sonic movie trilogy. Thanks so much for still sticking around if you managed to get this far into it. I really wanted to make a video that was dedicated to Sonic, as this series has meant so much to me growing up. Figured being as big of a movie buff I am, I felt no better way to discuss Sonic than to talk about his movies. And I'm glad they turned out as well as they did, with a lot of people really liking these movies. Maybe they're not perfect, but hey, not every movie has to be perfect. And in the case of the Sonic movies, they were still a good old time. If you like this video, please consider watching the other videos I've done in the past, Sonic related or not. I want to continue making more videos in the future, and I had a blast making this Sonic video, even if it did took a little longer than expected. And you bet your ass I'm going to be there for Sonic 4 when it comes out. I don't really have much else to say, but I want to thank everyone who helped support me during this entire video process. And I hope to continue making more videos like this in the future. As of now, please stay safe, enjoy whatever free time you might have, and always look on the bright side of things. Much like Sonic himself. Things might not always be the best most of the time, but as long as we see this blue hedgehog having a reason to keep on running, there's still a lot to look forward to in the world. So take that for what it's worth.